Hello, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Sci Cafe. I'm Carolyn Unk, the manager for our research communication team in the Office of the Vice President for Research. And we welcome you today. Actually, our team has been organizing the Sci Cafe for 5 years. But with this topic, I finally decided it was my turn to take this chair. So welcome and thank you for being here. Our office actually has several channels where we do research communication. You might know KAUST Discovery. We're going into our 13th issue coming up. KAUST Discovery is very much about portraying the results of KAUST research. And we also now have a new publication, KAUST Insight, which is about the story behind the discovery. And there we get a little bit more personal, talk about the journey a little bit more than just the destination. And I will get an opportunity to talk a little bit more about my team and our research communication later. But without further ado, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves. Raquel, could you please start for us?
Sure, thank you, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite. My name is Raquel Peshotto. I am an associate professor of marine science with the Red Sea Research Center. I'm a microbiologist, and my work is mainly focused on marine microbiomes and how beneficial bacteria can promote health of corals and other marine organisms.
Great, thank you so much, Raquel. Dean Ravi, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm also very pleased to see a lot of faces here, so thank you all for coming, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. My name is Ravi Samtari. I'm the Dean of the Physical Science and Engineering Division at KAUST. I'm also a professor of mechanical engineering with a secondary appointment in applied mathematics. My area of research is in fluid mechanics, specifically computational fluid mechanics and plasma physics. But I'm here really representing the leadership of KAUST and how research communication is important to the leadership. I hope to convey those kind of information to you all today. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Dean Ravi. Najdat, please tell us all about you.
Thank you, Carol, for the invite. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Najdat Bukaroum. I work with the KAUST Global Branding and Communications Department, partnering with researchers and scientists across KAUST, as well as divisions and departments. I work with my colleagues to further leverage the KAUST story, its impact, and its importance to all the audiences across the world, across different channels and platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Najdat. So we have individuals, we have divisions, and we have our greater large communication unit of global communications and branding here, and they are all communicating about research. What we identified in our new strategy was that we were looking for a space for researchers to talk about all kinds of research, and a little bit more broadly. So we started our own research communication channels, and through my engagement with those channels, I came to realize what an avid communicator Raquel is. So Raquel, could you please tell us a little bit about the value that you find in communicating about your research?
Sure. I think that overall it's very important to bridge different sectors of our society and promote discussion and interaction between these groups. In my particular field of research, because just to give you a background, I'm working on the development of tools that can promote coral health, that can help corals to cope with impacts. And why is this so important? Because these animals and the entire ecosystem that they build are threatened with even extinction in the next decades, within the next decade. So it's an urgent topic, and not everyone is aware of it. So I think specifically talking about what I'm doing, it's urgent, it's an urgent topic, and it's very important to bring awareness, because I think that not only for other researchers, but other members of our society, stakeholders, and to keep people engaged on trying to develop solutions. And more specifically for these area of research that I'm developing that is very new. So our group started to develop probiotics for corals. It's something absolutely new. It's like a medicine for corals that can protect them against bleaching, potentially protect them against bleaching, but we need to move very quickly on these developments. So it's a very important platform for us to connect with other researchers as well and try to connect and improve this development, accelerate the pace, and so we can apply this in time to save these organisms and ecosystems. So I think it's a overall very important way for us to be connected and to move forward together, and then with that accelerate this development.
So it brings you a lot of visibility, right?
It brings a lot of visibility, and this is important as well because we need people to understand that there are solutions so that we can continue. There are different things that need to be developed. So, for example, the International Coral Reef Society has just launched a plan to save coral reefs, and there are 3 different pillars that are equally important. So one of them is mitigation of CO2 emissions, the other one is mitigation of local pollution, and the third one is the development of active restoration and rehabilitation. So we need to make them stronger, and we need to restore the ecosystems that are already degraded. So we sit in this, within this third pillar, and we need to do that. We need to make them stronger to cope with the current conditions that we have and with the future scenarios that are predicted to be established. So the problem is that in terms of coral rehabilitation, most of the things that are available are still experimental. So we really need to develop this at a very accelerated pace. And for that, visibility is very important because we can attract collaborators that can contribute with that. We can attract stakeholders that can contribute to that, funding and students and people to actually also contribute with ideas and discussions. And this is why, in this case, especially because it's so urgent and it's so incipient, it's important to have this visibility and to stay connected, to actually report the developments and keep these stakeholders also engaged and participating in this process. And of course, also opens other doors and other ideas and developments that can contribute with that, because it's of course not a magic pill or a magic solution. It's one of the things that can contribute with the whole development of this field, and I think it's important that we are aware of other things that can also be integrated into our, framework and other ways for us to also contribute to other solutions as well.
Sounds great. It's very inspiring, Raquel. I hope you're all feeling inspired to communicate more about your research and all the connections you could make. Dean Ravi, from a position of leadership, why do you encourage the researchers in your division to communicate? What do you think is the value?
That's a very important question, Carolyn. First, I want to say, I was, for those who know me, they know me as a big skeptic of many things. But I was on the panel which interviewed Raquel, and we were completely floored with her communication of her science. Very passionate. She even won over a skeptic like me. So yeah, congratulations, Rachel. You did a fantastic job.
This is fantastic feedback. I wasn't aware.
And so now to answer the question, it helps to look back at history a little bit. Okay, so science as we know it is a few hundred years old. Okay, and the way the system evolved, most of science today is publicly funded or through private enterprise. Public funding comes through federal agencies, like things like the National Science Foundation and so on. So it is in some sense our duty, a social responsibility of the scientists to communicate to the public how the funds are being spent. It's also our duty and responsibility to educate the public. And if you can also inspire them, I think this is an added bonus. So education and inspiration is very important for us to go back and give back to the public for what they have given us. I mean, most scientists, I speak for most of us, we live really charmed lives, right? I mean, we get paid to do something we are really passionate about. I mean, this is a fantastic arrangement. So I think in some sense we owe it back to the public to tell them what we are doing. So communicating to the public on one end of the spectrum is super important. And I encourage my faculty to do that because they owe it, it's their social responsibility and duty to do so. But let's move on. You also have a duty to communicate, let's say, to the higher ups, to the upper management, to the stakeholders, to the board of trustees, people who are also policy makers. So it's important duty to communicate science to the policy makers so they can make informed decisions. I'm sure everybody's here heard of this COP26, right, that took place in Scotland. One of the main recommendations there was what? Anybody in the audience want to hazard a guess?
Yes. I was there.
It was the 1.5 degrees Celsius is what we can tolerate climate change, temperature changes, and it's to be, we need to achieve that by 2030, and we need to cut emissions by 50%. How did they come up with these numbers? Why 1.5 Celsius and why 50%? I mean, there's a lot of science and information and logical information and factual information that goes behind this decision making. So it's again a duty of the scientist, duty of our faculty to inform the policymakers and the stakeholders to make informed decisions. And the other aspect of communication that I encourage my faculty to do is peer-to-peer communication. I'm a mechanical engineer. I know maybe little about corals. People in my division may know little about biology, may know a little about computer science. But if you communicate, even within our division, we have engineers, we have chemists, we have people from different disciplines, and we tend to be super focused on what we do. But if you can communicate, the end result of this typically what happens is you get a lot of cross-fertilization of ideas. And this is really what is important and needed to sort of go to the next level in science. The hard problems today that exist are typically multidisciplinary, right? And if you don't communicate across your boundaries, you're not going to be able to make the difference. I mean, in specific disciplines, a lot of the hard problems that could be solved within that discipline are kind of done. Okay, there are still some left, but to really make big impact changes, usually given the limited amount of resources, you need to now step outside your comfort zone, start communicating with your peers. So I encourage my faculty, go have lunch with people, with other faculty, with not just faculty, it's with anybody, people on the street, postdoc students. Have exciting discussions. You never know what's coming out of those discussions. I have plenty of examples there. So maybe in the QA session, I can delve on some of those.
Sure.
So let me stop here and maybe you can go to the next question.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dean Ravi. That's, the more and more we talk, the more and more evident it's becoming the value of communicating with non-experts, but also people who aren't experts in your field, but also other scientists to find that overlap. So thank you. Najda, as an international communication officer for our central communication unit, what do you see as being the value of communicating about research?
Science and innovation are at the heart of what KAUST does. KAUST is a very unique story, but not everyone knows about. So it's really important to tell this story, and our scientists have abundant opportunities. In a way, the scientists and researchers at KAUST are the unofficial ambassadors. Dean Ravi touched on a very critical point, which is to actually talk and address how people can collaborate and communicate and work on different topics and different researches, but it's beyond that. Because people outside of KAUST would want to know, why is KAUST that unique? Why are you here as a researcher, as a scientist? Why does the pioneers of different scientific research fields come to Saudi, come to KAUST specifically, spend here years to do really extraordinary work and research, and how does that translate to the general public? The value of communication in its essence is not only just to inform people or educate them. There's a process to it, but also it is part of what we do on our daily basis. When it comes to research communication specifically, we always say communication is an art and a science by itself, so it's nothing strange to what scientists do in their daily lives. In our scenario as KAUST, as global branding and communication, we always seek those really hero stories, or the stories that can kind of get people to think, why is KAUST really important? Why does it exist? And how does that relate to us as external audiences, be in Saudi Arabia or be across the world? There's abundant examples of the campaigns that have been done. Recently, we even extended that communication, that research communication, to focus a bit more on the individuals behind the research. Raquel was part of that, was part of a recent campaign that we're going to launch soon, but it was the story behind the story, but in a more human voice, and that's something we're going to touch more about later on.
Sounds good. Thank you, Najda. Dean Ravi, I have another question for you. Again, from a position of leadership, what do you see as being potential costs or benefits? I mean, you touched on benefits and actually the need to do such, but what would be cost and benefit to you?
Yeah, there are, of course, many good benefits and costs of not communicating our science. So let me start off with first an example, right? And this was the result of communication between politicians, but also communications between the scientific communities. Maybe I'm going to tell you how old I am because of the example. In 1985, there was a meeting between then I don't remember what they were called, the Communist Party leader in the Soviet Union was Gorbachev, and the American president was Ronald Reagan, and they met in Iceland, in Reykjavik, and they wanted to come to some common ground, right? So this was about limiting arms and so on. And what they were talking about was, how can we bring humanity together and what scientific project we can do? And they launched the idea of creating ITER. ITER now, if you don't know, ITER is the largest scientific experiment that's ever been funded. It's in excess of 25 billion euros. This is a project, fusion reactor project that's under construction in the south of France. Came about because fusion energy, is a long-term proposition which will help humanity overcome the energy problem. And it came about because of communication between two disconnected communities of scientists, one in the Soviet Union, one in the United States. And somehow they were able to convince the politicians that this was a way to bring humanity or scientists together. So that's diplomacy. So this was really, scientific diplomacy at its best, in some sense. But inspiring people, right? When I was a kid, and if you heard a good, as a kid, I watched Cosmos in the late 70s and early 80s. This was by Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was a professor from Cornell who launched this TV series called Cosmos. It was extremely inspiring, okay? Good scientific communication can inspire people to take on careers in STEM. So inspiration was very important. But there are also a lot of costs to either bad communication or improper communication. So today there's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of fake news. So you have to dispel fake news, and one way to dispel fake news is let the scientists come up with the factual communications that can help people make up their minds. Okay, if bad communication can lead to people questioning the value of vaccinations, the value of whether global warming is actually happening or not. Bad communication can also lead to confirmation bias within the scientific community and can lead to groupthink. So one example that comes to mind is Alzheimer's research. For a long time, scientists were thinking that there was something called the amyloid cascade hypothesis. So, amyloid plaques in the brain were considered the cause of Alzheimer's, and the bias and because of poor communication in scientists or among scientists, it became like a group thing. People only wanted to work on this problem, and it was only in 2019 or so that it was finally dispelled that it is not the cause; it's a symptom. And tackling that led many careers down the wrong track for a long time. Okay, so bad communication can have severe costs like that. And another cost or another benefit from good scientific communication is skepticism, right? It's good to be skeptical about things, right? So this is something that we should teach students, right? Today, there's so much news, even about science. It's good scientific communication should have some amount of skepticism in it, right? You should question. The communication should open questions in the minds of the reader or the person being communicated to. So they can be good citizens, they can make informed decisions. And finally, one good benefit of communication, this is for your own self. When I'm communicating, when I'm trying to write proposals, thinking about things, good communication clears your mind, okay? You can get a lot of clarity just by communicating an idea to your peers, to students, to others. There's a famous quote, I think it was attributed to Richard Feynman, which said, if you cannot communicate to your grandmother what you do, then you don't understand it enough. I'm paraphrasing, it wasn't exactly the quote like that. But this tells you, if you're unable to communicate to a grandmother what you're doing, maybe you need to sit and think and clarify the ideas in your own head. So a good benefit of communication is also it helps to clear your own mind. And it helps to kind of, clarity is always a good thing, I would say. Let me stop there, so thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
And then we give people, if we scientists communicate our science using palatable language, we give people instruments and we give them knowledge that they can use to make up their minds. And this is very important.
Absolutely.
That we use this opportunity now that the social media and all the platforms provides us with.
You can inherit some champions for your work, I guess. Yeah, great. We showed Dean Ravi's slide there briefly.
Oh yeah, let me speak to those. So I'm pointing to my left, but this is your left, right?
Yeah.
So the guy says, tell me in layman terms what the breakthrough means, and he basically spews technical language, right? So a bad example of communication. And the one on the right has written this complicated formula and says, okay, but this is the simplified version for the general public. Okay, another example of not good communication. We probably violated copyright laws by showing these cartoons.
Okay,
right?
let's take it down. Anyway, thank you. Obviously, Grandma's not going to understand any of that, and neither do I. So, very, very good example. Thank you. And now, I'm sorry, team. Can you throw back up now Raquel's visual? So, Raquel, can you tell us what is the meaning of this coral warrior business here?
Okay, so as I said, this is like a fight that we are now trying to save corals, and we are running against the clock, and so we are developing these new tools. And I had an interaction with a journalist. We came up with this article where he named me the coral warrior, because I'm actually trying to develop this, that it's currently the only thing close to a medicine for corals that can maybe be applied and developed and implemented at some point. And then he came up with that, and there was a post on Twitter. And then I thought, well, but I'm not doing that alone. There are lots of other people developing similar things and other tools, and actually collaborating with me as well, that collectively could be called them the Coral Avengers or something like that. And they all got very interested in this thread, and because of these joke or these things that we came up with, they all interacted and then started naming themselves, like I'm the polyp boy, and making parallels with some characters of some heroes. And from there, we started discussing also important things of our science and ways we are collaborating, and topics where we are collaborating with each other and how we can improve it. So I think it was a very good opportunity for us as a scientific community to connect in a more, relaxed way and think about the things that we are doing. And at the same time, students and especially high school students and people from our society, the public who saw that, kind of can relate with this type of initiatives that we have, and then they get attracted by the topic and they start reading about it. And this is how we bring awareness. I think it's a good way to bring, to caught people's attention, and from there you can create and build your story and communicate your science. And I think that was a very cool example, actually.
It is a very cool example.
Yeah.
All of these are tweets. They're all Twitter.
Yes.
Is that your preferred platform? And if so, why?
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely the platform that I use the most. I think it's interesting because of the communication, the way we communicate science, and I think Twitter allows us to think before we share the news, because it has to be short. So we need to make the best use of it. And then we have to think about what we have to say and then communicate it in a very clear and short way. And I think it attracts people's attention. And then they actually go and read the paper or the news or anything like that. And there's another thing that I think is very interesting. It's actually something that I like about social media, but in this case, I think I've been seeing that happening a lot, is a two-way channel, right? We don't only share we not only share our research or our data, but we also open this channel for people to ask questions, to make comments, to even criticize what we are thinking and what we are doing. And with that type of interaction, we can improve what we are doing. And I don't think that, and I do think that this is a very important way for us to hear people's opinion, and sometimes researchers, sometimes people from the public, and in many cases, it brings us some aspects we hadn't thought about, and with that we can improve our science. So I think it's a very positive aspect of communicating science through Twitter. It's a platform where people do that. People ask questions, people share feedback, which is also very encouraging in many cases, and young researchers, female researchers, underrepresented groups have the same space, and they can all communicate, and then we get to see what these people were doing as well, and interact, and everybody can benefit from that.
That sounds great. It's great to be able to take criticism and be constructive with it.
Definitely. I think scientists should always take criticism in a constructive way, because science is something that it's always in movement. We are always developing it. We are always improving it. We are always discovering something new. So we need to be very open-minded in the sense that criticism is usually useful. Because if sometimes it's something that we have thought about already, and we can quickly and clearly reply and show that it is not this way, but eventually people will bring questions or comments that will make us think and even improve what we are doing. So, and I think that I've seen that happening on Twitter several times, and I don't see this as a bad thing. I actually think that it's okay. We have just started, we are right now writing a paper that was born on Twitter from a brainstorm we had about a topic that we disagreed. It was like a topic that one of us posted and the other person disagreed, and then we started discussing it. And at some point we thought, like, well, so many people jumped in with so many different opinions that we thought, this is definitely a topic where we need to sit and have some discussion and actually come up with some conclusions, because it's clear that there is a gap in our knowledge here, and we need to address these topics. So, and I think that this is extremely useful, and it connects and it increases the diversity of people who are interacting. It increases, I mean, it makes it more inclusive, because it was an open tweet. Anyone could join, and we invited anyone who wanted to join in this discussion and the elaboration of this paper. So I think it's only beneficial.
That's great. It's wonderful to hear you saying that as a researcher, Raquel.
Yeah.
What do you think, Najdat, as a communication professional? How do you see the value of this two-way street of communication?
Well, Raquel probably best positioned at communication processes being as a two-way stream, which is really critical, because when we are trying to speak with anyone, whether externally or within each other, we need to create this room of engagement. It could be either affirmation or critique or anything, but it allows us to either deliver and hear each other out. Because we're governed in a digital age now, the access to information is out there for anyone. Anyone can access the information. Dean Ravi mentioned something really important, which is the interpretation of this information. It's not within the dissemination or the source control. It's the power given to the recipient. And hence we have all of this kind of sorts of fake news, misinterpretation, and judgment, and all of that stuff. However, when it comes to social media, and because of this digital platforms, like, anyone can go on, say whatever they want, act the way they want, and it really doesn't mean anything rather than just a statement. Raquel's example of using Twitter, for instance, studies have showed recently, and it's becoming, everyone can pick up on this, is that if you see something trending quite often, your brain will start convincing you that it's true. And this is where the whole essence of communications comes in. Because what are you trying to do with this communication, with this piece of information? And this is how we as communication professionals, we always try to break down the message, agree on the narrative, working closely with scientists and researchers, what are they trying to say, who they're trying to communicate with, and then agree on what would be the best case. In this case, for instance, for Raquel, Twitter was really an easy channel because it's a real-time platform. She posts something, she'll get a feedback, and then there the engagement becomes more kind of an active and interactive. But in many cases, we send out stories or we send out information, and people would perceive it differently or would have comments. And one of the sections that are usually missed in many websites or many platforms is the comments section. Like, even if you have a really nice story, go to that comments section and see what people are talking about. Because from there, you will know how successful you were with your communication. So this is something that also, as a living process, we need to learn, we need to assess, and always listen to it as well, so that we can communicate backwards.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everything we're talking about now is it's like, it's happening in real time. Communication is happening so real time. Dean Ravi, has it always been this way? What's over the course of your career?
Not that you're old or anything.
Not that you're old. Just
I totally anticipated this question because I knew somebody would say, how was it when the dinosaurs roamed the earth? And how is it now in the age of Twitter?
They had a tablet back then, didn't they?
Very good.
So now, well, first of all, let's all be, I think nobody disagrees that science is after getting to the truth, whatever truth is. And two-way communication is very important, right? So, peer review process is actually a two-way communication. You're studying your paper, they send you back comments, you rebuttal and you send it back. More modern ways to do it. Twitter is another example that Raquel has successfully used. But at the end of the day, science is a self-correcting enterprise, let's say, okay? Because whatever is false, whatever is incorrect, whatever is bad, will eventually get filtered out to the point that nobody will believe in it, right? Today, almost nobody believes the earth is flat, right? I mean, there is still a flat earth society, but that, at this point, that idea is dead. So there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of information out there, but eventually the bad information dies out. Mm-hmm. So how have things changed? I was just telling Raquel that when I was a PhD student, I had to go to the library. I mean, imagine that. Physically walk over to the library and pull journals off a shelf, photocopy them for 10 cents a page. So I would try to fit 2 pages on the same copy, and it was very different, okay? There was a very limited amounts of information. It was very accessible by going to the library, looking at actual physical journals. And email had just come online. Internet was an old thing. It was called the ARPANET, and we were talking about it just before this iCafe. ARPANET was an old thing, but internet was kind of just taking shape and being more widely used. So access to information was limited. Now you fast forward that today, right? In the year 2020, 21, anywhere depending on which source of data you look at, there are 5 to 7 million papers, published papers, peer-reviewed published papers. The amount of information has completely exploded. Okay, so there is a need. So good communication, good research communication, is also about curating all this information, distilling it down to things that are important to convey to everybody, and also making sure that the important ideas are surviving, because there is just way too much information compared to when I was there. I mean, it's very easy now to also do gratuitous citations in papers, right? People say, okay, there have been a lot of similar studies, and then you put a parenthesis and you put 1-20. So you're kind of citing 20 papers which are completely meaningless to cite in that context, because it really tells you nothing about what's in those papers and how it relates to your work. Why can you do that? You can do that because access to information is cheap, readily available. So it's also the job of the scientist to make sure that you're not just self-propagating this kind of stuff over and over again. So communications have changed a lot. Again, back then, I mentioned Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was a popularizer of science. academic departments used to look down upon popularizers of science, right? They used to think, okay, he's not a purist. Those days are gone, okay? Today, there are many good communicators of science who are also very serious scientists. We had Kip Thorne from Caltech here, who was one of the web speakers a few years back, right? He was also one of the science advisors to the movie Interstellar, right? He's a world authority on general relativity, but he's also written popular books. I mean, he's one of 3 authors on the Bible, what we call of gravitation, and he's popularizing science. There's Sean Carroll from Caltech, who also is a great popularizer of science. You need this information to not only reach out to the general layman public, but also other scientists. I mean, I read works from biology because I cannot read the technical papers. So in order to be an informed citizen today, if I have to learn about genetics, I have to go to a popular source and get good sources of information. There are plenty of them. So again, good curation of science and all of that is important today, and things have just exploded. KAUST Discovery is an excellent example, right? Please read that, okay? Don't just flip through it.
The pictures are really nice, though.
Pictures are always nice, right?
They are really nice.
Sometimes some fields are not conducive to producing good pictures. I mean,
if I may touch on that,
please.
It's because it's really important. When we talk about communication, we're always thinking a piece of text, content, words, and that's it. In today's world, it's not that. A video, a picture can do miracles. I mean, this has been going on for some time, but also seeing is believing more than ever. With the fast, rapid exchange of information, the real-time platforms like social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, even with the social texting and messaging, which is like WhatsApp or Signal, it's easier to send either a voice clip or just a picture, and people can pick and relate to it right away. And this is also a format of communication. It's still in its, well, I wouldn't say it's in infancy, but it's still getting a lot of heat on how it is being represented because of the privacy, the copyrights, and all of that stuff. But when you have something original that tells the story, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So that's what we always push and go with. And even if we had text, we always support it with some visuals, whether a video or
a ribbon cutting ceremony
oh,
underwater.
The ribbon cutting, yeah.
Great. Actually, this is my next point that I wanted to ask you about, Najdat. So we have also this challenge of, I actually looked up on Scopus, and it said that KAUST is affiliated with 1,600 publications last year. So we can't cover 1,600 publications, even with the website, which is, we're publishing stories weekly. How from the main channel of communications, do you choose? What are we going to celebrate? What are we going to put out there to the public? And if the AV team wants to throw up that slide, that'd be perfect.
There's a nice slide with some examples you guys can. But let me get on this first.
Yeah.
It's all about what you're trying to say. We get all of these requests of, I want a press release out tomorrow. What's the press release about? Oh, a paper I just published. Okay, what do you want to say? Oh, I just want to tell everyone that I published a paper. Fair enough. There's certain publications, there's certain channels you can do that. But from a central department about communications, when I want to speak with the external audience, I'm not speaking with peers. I'm speaking with general public, who from students up to 65 years old, nanas and grandmas and granddads, and we're talking to industry decision makers, we're talking to official decision makers, and the common thing about them all is how do they relate to this story? Why is it important for them? So it always comes down to the narrative. What are we trying to say? What's the message there? And sometimes we have all of these generic research papers, but the main concern of the scientists is to actually put the news out there. But if you look at it from a different perspective, how will this apply, or how would this impact KAUST? What would it tell about KAUST? If it's just a press release, as people would usually ask for, then it's really not delivering on its objective to set the information outside. But then if we tell the story behind it, like the people behind it, the researcher, There's a slide in front of you guys, you can see it now. If you see, there's a central piece which was done about our own Raquel Peshotto with the Coral Probiotics Village ribbon cutting. It was actually a very nice project to begin with. When Raquel reached out and told me we want to do a nice ribbon cutting, we also had on campus the National Geographic team who were filming a documentary about KAUST. And this is a first of its kind around the globe. No other university worldwide has its own documentary on National Geographic. And we were lucky enough to actually get on the boat, go down with Raquel and members from the community and researchers and her research group, and actually took a tour around. It was really nice. And this is a full-page coverage that was achieved in Saudi Gazette, in Saudi Arabia's English-speaking newspaper, Saudi Gazette. There's different topics here covered, but wherever you can pick, you can realize that the story is relatable to the audiences. One of my favorites is actually the Fast Company, the innovation at speed. We were doing a campaign in North America, and it was really difficult to kind of tell the American average reader what KAUST is and what it does. And that was around December, and Saudi was hosting its first Formula One race ever. And we decided, you know what? Netflix, Formula One, Driving to Survive is trending. Everyone loves that show on Netflix. We pitched the idea to our partner agency there, and we're like, yeah, that's good. We told them we have a McLaren partnership. We are the R&D partner for McLaren. Let's do something about it. And it went viral. The page itself, within a couple of weeks, got 50,000 reads. It was read 50,000 times and almost reached 3 million to 4 million views on social media. We loved it. It was just the first time ever that we kind of made KAUST relatable to the American audience, and not in a technical way, but in something that they can relate to. They're watching this Netflix series, and oh, there's a university that's doing the work. And it was all positioned in really simple language, and it was made engaging and interactive. So this is an example of how we try to communicate or choose out of 7 billion research papers, 7 million research papers.
That sounds great. So it's got to be relatable, nice timing.
And the audience, like, know who we're talking to and what we're trying to tell them. Right. And then from there, you can decide what channel you want to go with, whether it's going to be social media, if it's going to go on a website, digital, or print, or press releases, and all of that stuff. Yeah.
It's all about the audience.
Yeah, exactly. It is about the audience.
And speaking of audience, it's time for audience questions. Does anyone want to ask one of our panelists a question? We have a pass-around mic box here somewhere. Anybody wants to step up? Otherwise, I can go first.
Don't be shy.
I have a question over here.
Hi. It's a question for Najdat, but actually for everyone, because I think they might have different answers. We know that the most successful communication happen in the entertainment area, in the game field. Mm-hmm. And so how corporate communication can leverage on gamification and entertainment, and where is the balance?
Who want to talk? It's open if anyone wants to.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's an open
I think
question.
you're the expert.
No. Let me see if I got your question right. I'm sorry, Intermediate. So you're asking how can corporate communication deliver on the gamification, you said, of entertainment?
Entertainment and the gamification are two new
yes.
channels for communicating with
yes.
people. So how corporate communication, like the university mm-hmm. communication, can leverage, can use these two new channels, and where is the right balance?
Oh, that's a very good question. When we're talking about new platforms, they're all in the trial and error kind of area. Like, we always try what works, what does not work. It's going to be a process where you have to focus on the communication as a two-way stream where you have to learn. But in instance, when it comes to the corporate comms, trying to take something that's really rigid and make it accessible to everyone, the process behind it is a bit complicated, especially if you're talking about gamification of that. Because when you talk about games, now the gaming industry itself is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And you have age groups different. Who are you trying to reach out to with this game or with this entertainment process. People treat your applications or the games or the content differently. So it really boils down to how you're trying to position yourself, where you want to position yourself, and what would be the best process. So you can't just go on and say, oh, I'm going to make a game and everyone's going to pick it up. But this is not how it works. It's the same thing with any communication piece that you're sending out. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Or,
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Najda. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, we've got 2 more questions. Mike is coming. There it is.
Go first. Okay.
yeah.
So this is a follow-up to the question on entertainment. I think one of the also great and effective communication channels are songs. And we've seen that with the United Nations and during, I think, COP26 with a famous band. So have you ever considered making like a song, special song for KAUST or something like that?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
That's a very good question, actually.
There may be a new committee,
Yeah, well,
the song committee.
no, I think this is no. The question
Like a
is,
scientific song, it could be, right?
Just like a
Like
cappella.
have you?
Yeah.
A cappella, yeah.
You want to go ahead? Go ahead.
No, we
No.
just had a visit of a cappella. You know, this maybe
cappella
this is
group,
maybe this is a good collaboration that
Yeah.
we could have to communicate our science. with sound.
There's I believe a house DJ that was a scientist, and he started doing house music from his experiments. Like he recorded those in his lab, and then he decided, oh, this is nice. I'm going to do this as a thing to make money. I can't remember the name, but I'll share that. But yes, you said music is a form of communication. It is a form of communication, and it's always been something that is expressive. And we've noticed a lot of kind of marrying between the technical aspect and the entertainment, which goes back to the first question. You guys remember Bill Nye the Science Guy? Anyone remember him?
I remember.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, this is. So Bill Nye the Science Guy was a science show that I grew up watching, and that's how I loved science from it. And they had these nice musicals and all of these stuff, and it was always games and fun and everything. And it was targeting to specifically to children aged between, let's say, 6 up to 13 or 12. But to cut it short to your question, yes, this should be done. There's a lot of potential to it. We haven't tried anything at KAUST, but you just gave us a nice idea that we can explore.
Yeah,
I
very
agree.
nice idea. Thank you.
Can I add to that? I mean,
Sure.
you know, if I've seen on YouTube, like there was a guy who made a song of the entire periodic table, right? And
It makes it easier,
and the tune is catchy, and then you for kids who are, if the tune is catchy, then they start remembering the details and the names of the elements. And then I've been to conferences where sometimes people have sung songs based on the technical presentations. And sometimes it sticks in your head, so it's a good
Exactly.
idea to have
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
along these lines.
Sure. Thank you. Good thought. We'll come back to that. We can have a conference after about that. One more question?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for the inspiring talk. I'm Elena. I'm a research scientist in Raquel's team. And it's not a question, but I would like to hear from the 4 of you which advice you would give to younger and not that young anymore researchers that to develop this skill of communicating, because this is a skill, right? And it's like some people are just natural, but they are exceptions. I tell that to Raquel every time, but she says I'm biased. But everyone here agrees with that. But this is a skill that we should actually have training and develop, because we don't have any of this. We do science, we stay in the lab, we don't learn how to communicate our science So which advice you would give to people to get trained and
Who would like to start?
I can go. We have a soft skills lab in KAUST, and there are resources, there are classes, there are short courses on how to communicate effectively. So just keep your eyes open. You will see some of these, and will help you. In fact, the VPR office recently is talking about, they asked us for nominations for postdocs to help them teach better and communicate and so on. So there are resources, and from time to time you will see announcements about that. My advice to younger people about communication, so I might sound a little bit preachy here, but really a few words of advice. One is be honest and be authentic about what you communicate. And remember the ultimate goal, right? The ultimate goal is to get the message out about science and educate the public and so on. And try to limit the amount of self-promotion, because that's a tendency today, is to self-promote a lot, have a lot of hype, okay? Just because your treatment can cure cancer in a mouse doesn't mean it can extrapolate to humans. So avoid the temptation to say, oh yeah, 5 or 10 years we'll be curing cancer. Don't succumb to hype. Seasoned people like me, for example, I can see through hype very quickly, and so you can imagine a lot of people see through that, and then it becomes disingenuous. Then people don't trust your communication. So be authentic, be honest, try to get the message out would be my advice.
Yeah,
Coming from an old person.
I was going to say the exact
yeah.
same thing, like that one thing that we see in social media as well is the irresponsible communication of science as well. So we need to avoid overselling, and because of course it's exactly what Ravi just said, that we need to stick to the data that we have, communicate the data that we have, and avoid overselling, because that way it will have credibility. And this will help people to actually get educated about that specific topic and discuss this with confidence, because then it's based on data. So I think the first thing is to stick to that, like to communicate data, avoid overselling, and also to be ready to discuss, as I said, that to be open for discussion, for criticism. Although what I've been seeing, it's more positive feedback than anything else. For example, one thing that I get a lot, and this is because you and other people from my team also try at least to communicate the science, is that they get very pleased to see, I have, this is by chance, I have a very female-dominated team, and they communicate a lot. So I think this also helps inspiring other groups and other female researchers to do to actually, because they see female researchers doing these type of cutting edge, or working on this cutting edge topic, and this inspires them on developing these skills as well. So to be open for this type of communication also with these people who sometimes want to hear your opinion, or get some feedback from you too. It's not only about us getting feedback from the public, but it's also about providing it. And I see that a lot, that some people text me, send me private messages asking about KAUST, about research, about career development. And so try to save some time to actually interact with these people. And I think that it's why we are doing this. And very, very importantly, to try to actually value the science, not the individual. And this is something that we discussed earlier, that it's super important for us to try to actually weight this in a way that the science we are doing and the goals is actually the science that we are doing, that the goal is going to be communicate the science, not praise ourselves only.
I think maybe Najdat and I can speak also as being communicators for researchers. A nice angle can also be to communicate about your colleagues. So if you're a bit embarrassed to, some people love to self-promote, but some other people don't. And a nice way to maybe get started could be, if you see a colleague of yours doing something that you think is cool, of course, make sure you get the science right, what they're doing. But then you could maybe, put out a little tweet about what they're doing, and cross-disciplinary as well, right? Not just the other people in your lab, and then kind of the love can come back around, I think.
That's a very good point.
And when you want to communicate, remember, communication is bilateral. It goes back and forth. It's not just you trying to channel whatever you want to say. And the pros have already mentioned, be authentic, stand by your facts, okay? But one key element that Raquel touched on, and I want to emphasize, is people. You're talking to people. People relate to people. So it's not, even if you're a scientist, people still look at you as one of them. You only have the advantage of that knowledge, of the fact that you're doing this research. So keep that balance, keep a consistent message, know what you're trying to say, be very specific, keep it short and simple. It's the KISS approach. Also, be open. Like, no matter what you do, whether you did it right or you did it wrong, you're gonna have haters. People are gonna critique you. People are gonna comment. People are gonna try to throw at you or project at you their insecurities or their own negative thoughts or whatever. Dean Ravi said something about the hype. It's the noise. People just love doing noise. Where you stand with all of this really defines how you will be perceived by everyone else. And because in today's social media or digital world, it's easy to just put something out and people think, oh, it's gonna live forever. No, it will die, it will fade away. So be very, very responsible, that's the right word to use. Be very responsible on what you're putting out there and how you are engaging and dealing with it. Because all of this will pay off your communications efforts.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Najdat. And I think we could actually go on for another hour, but I think we better stop and let people get on. So thank you so very much for being here and inspiring us to communicate more about our science and giving us a few tips and tricks and watching out for any possible pitfalls. But yeah, so thank you very much, and thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you very much.